Yes, okay, lots of yeses. Thank you very much. So, well, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, or good morning, depending where you are. See if we have people in Thailand where it's morning and people in Poland where it's still nighttime. And I'm located in Florida right now. You can see all the sunshine out the window. So I know some of the people here are from Canada and from other parts of the United States where it's quite cold right now. I know Emily's in the Boston office, I believe. And today it is 81 degrees here. I'm saying it with a big smile because it's actually really great weather here this whole week. So today I'm going to talk about how to write better sentences, activities for your students, and how they can write better sentences. And I'll be doing this sort of from two perspectives. One perspective is that you're the teacher and you want to assign these different activities and tasks that will have your students writing, writing, and writing. But at the same time, I'm going to try to limit myself today to 5 activities that require limited teacher grading time. So you've already seen we have about 100 people, over 100 people now. We have over 100 people here right now. And I did a session earlier where we had about 500 people, so lots and lots of teachers. And obviously, many countries all over the world. I don't know somebody who's teaching in Portugal. There was one from Portugal. I've never met this person. I don't know this person's classroom. I don't know the students. But one thing I do know is I have never heard a teacher say, I have too much free time, right? Everybody doesn't have enough time. I can't cover the material, and even when I try to cover the material that I have, or I think I might be able to do it, I always run out of time. So I'm going to try to help teachers do some activities that do two things. Students will be writing, writing, and writing, but you don't have to do a lot of grading. So I'm not saying you don't have to do any grading, but I have activities that I hope will help your students and not cut into your time too much. So before we start today, I'm going to introduce myself a little bit and talk about the students that I teach, and then I want you to introduce yourselves and talk about the students that you teach. But let me go first and explain what I'm going to say. So first of all, Emily introduced me. I've been teaching ESL, EFL for about 40 years now. I have studied many different languages: French, Spanish, Arabic, Malay, Japanese, German, different proficiency levels. But in a few of those languages, I've tried to become a better writer as well. In the students where I teach at the University of Central Florida, the students that I teach are primarily students who are trying to enter a university or a college. So these are students who 100% want academic language. And I always, if you've heard me talk before, I always talk about this one notion of learner needs. Learner needs should run or control all of our classroom decisions. So somebody will ask me, do you think I should teach this a certain way? Should I teach this verb tense? And I always say, I don't know your students. What do your students want to do? Are they trying to become future English teachers? If so, then teach all of these different things. Well, my students aren't trying to become future English teachers. They're trying to become future university students in English. And let's ask ourselves for a minute, which of the 4 skills do you really need, or which of them, it could be 1 or 2, do you need in order to be a student in a university classroom? So of the 4 skills of speaking, listening, and reading, writing, think about this for a minute. So which of those 4 skills do you need? Do you need 1 of them? Do you need 2 of them? Do you need all 4 of them? Well, of course, you could argue that you need all 4 skills, and all 4 skills are important. And yes, I would love for my students to have great listening, great speaking, great reading, great writing. But I can tell you one thing. The students I teach right now, this particular semester, I'm not teaching ESL students. This semester, I'm teaching future teachers. So I have students who are US citizens, a few international students, but they're English-speaking students who are studying to become future teachers of English, primarily English conversation. So with those students, it's a regular university class. We study English grammar, we study pedagogy, how to operate a class, how to write a lesson plan, etc. My students certainly have to read the book and read websites and read material. But in class, we don't have any reading activities. I never do anything where I would test or assess their reading. In fact, I have 30 students in my section this semester, in the one undergraduate class, and I cannot right now tell you which student reads better than any other. I have no idea. And most professors have absolutely no idea of any of the students' reading ability because we don't see students read. All right, well, what about listening? Well, yes, you need good listening skills because in class you need to listen and take notes. But there are students who don't have good listening skills, and what they do is they try to borrow the notes of a classmate later on. So you can get by class, not very well, but you could get by. You could manage the class with weaker listening skills. What about speaking skills? Do you need speaking skills in a university class? Well, I know you want to say yes. I think speaking any language, French, Spanish, German, Japanese, is a very important thing. But we're not talking about being a Japanese speaker or an English speaker. We're talking about being a university student. So the question is, in a university class, do you need to be able to speak English super well? And the answer is absolutely no. Because of my 30 students, right now, I think I might, and we're in week 9, so halfway through the semester already. I've had them for 9 weeks. I probably have heard only 10 of them, maybe 10, speak out loud in class. And I'm a pretty interactive person. When they're doing group activities, I don't know who's speaking and who's not speaking. When I break my class into 10 groups of 3, for example, I don't monitor the speaking situation. So listening, you need to take some notes, but you can get by with somebody else's notes. Speaking, you really don't have to speak too much in class unless I call on this one person. I don't call on people too much in class because I'm not trying to test them. Mostly, I ask a question, people volunteer. I try to make sure that somebody from the back, somebody from the front answers the question, but I don't keep track of whether student number 16, can speak well or not. Reading, I assume you can read, but I've never seen my students read. Writing is very different though. Every university class requires students to submit assignments that are written. By written, I mean handwritten or typed on the computer, either way, right? So you need writing skills. What kind of writing skills do you need? It depends. Some classes, you only need, in my class I have right now, students don't write a research paper. They write what we call small reflection journals. So each of my students will go work with an international student from Poland or China or Saudi Arabia and do conversation for 1 hour. And afterward, they have to write 2 or 3 paragraphs about their interaction with the student that day. Basically, it's a log, LOG, a log or a record of what happened in that session when they spoke to the Arabic speaker or the German speaker, for example, right? So they have to write something, but mine are doing that kind of writing. Whether you're doing paragraphs or essays, or even if the only writing you do is on exams where the teacher will ask you, what's the difference between this and that, or why did the War of 1812 end, or something like that. You have to write an essay, short essay, maybe 4 or 5 sentences, maybe 10 sentences. But the point is, whatever you're writing, a paragraph or an essay, it all starts with sentences, sentences, and sentences. So today I'm going to concentrate on sentences a lot. Those are the students that I teach. So let's start by asking you a few questions. So let's start with the first one. If you would type in the box, where are you from? So right now we have about 140 people. Go ahead and type, so everybody can see how many different countries we have represented here. 2 from Argentina. I go to Argentina a lot. I'm a tennis fanatic and playing on red clay tennis courts, and Argentina is famous for that. See, Arkansas, Brazil, Palestine, Michigan, Czech Republic. Wow. So you can see we have people from all over the world right now, okay? And there's no way that I can tell 138 people exactly how to teach your class. So I always talk about learner needs. And that takes me to my second question, which is, how long have you been teaching? So this is where you've been teaching. Teaching anything. How long have you been teaching? So I see a question from somebody about speaking and writing. I'll come back to a Q&A at the end of the session today, okay? So on this chart, if you'll go ahead and click where you are, how many years have you been teaching? There's the poll is now on, you'll see a separate box if you would. So go ahead and click over there. 0 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, 6 to 10, or more than 10. Right now, more than 10. We have some senior teachers here today, it looks like. Well, about 30. Okay, yeah, 40 here. Way to go. 30 years. You survived 3 decades of teaching. Well, you can see the teachers we have today, the majority of people have taught for more than 10 years. All right? So let's go look at our third question now. And the third question is going to say, who are your students? So in the chat box, the students that you're teaching, are they high school students? Are they adults? Are they university students? Are they business people? So I see young adults, university students and adults, high school, K-8, all right, business people, community college, same as mine, said Rita, thank you very much, adult business. So you can see we have a wide gamut. We have a whole range of different kinds of students here, all right? And then my fourth question for you today, the fourth question is, why do your students need good writing ability? So suppose, for example, I don't teach, obviously I don't teach at your school, but if you had to summarize in 1 sentence or 2 sentences, or even 1 or 2 phrases, your students are learning to write English in order to To do what? Let's see, for college courses, okay, to succeed in academics, to apply into enter a university, communication skills. Okay, it's used for everything. So we're talking about not just writing academic, but also being able to write emails, professional emails, for example, is one thing. All right. All right, and so I'm going to go to our fifth question right now. See, lots and lots of different situations here, lots of different reasons. And my fifth question is, if you had, I don't teach in Palestine, I don't teach in Czech Republic. So for example, I'm not teaching in Poland. If you had to tell me one thing that students find very difficult to do in writing in English, what's one thing that's very difficult? All right, punctuation. See, somebody wrote punctuation. Word order, sentence structure, yep. Getting started, just having some ideas. I tell you, if everybody, you just, as you type your answers, look and see what other people have written. So I see summarizing, vocabulary, grammar, word order, paragraph structure, these different things. So I want you to imagine, for example, I'm a native English speaker at a university, a professor at a university, and of course we have classes there for English speakers who are trying to learn how to compose, how to write in English. If I went to Argentina, I'm sure at the Argentina University there are classes to teach people how to write better in Spanish, right? Some of the things that you're writing here are things that native speakers also have problems with. So if you teach, for example, you teach ESL, and you might teach English speakers as well, or even if you're teaching Spanish to non-native speakers or Arabic to non-native speakers, the activities I'm going to show you today I think will be helpful. Now, what I'm going to show you today is this is not necessarily tied to any one book that you can use with the book, without the book, but the book today I'm going to be taking from is called Great Writing Book 3, and I'll show you those activities. So here's the blurb. You can read this yourself. Here's a summary of what we'll be doing today, and I have put a few words in red just to kind of speed things up and show you a better focus of what I'm doing. Now, there are lots of reasons people would learn how to write, as you guys have said already. There are lots of things that we could talk about in terms of teaching ideas for helping people become better writers. But today I'm going to focus on sentences. So you'll see over here, we've got, where's my arrow? There we go. So here we've got the word sentences, right? I'm going to concentrate on sentences. Whether you're writing paragraphs or essays or essay questions or even an email to your professor or an email to a company, right? An internal memo to someone else on your company, that shouldn't be chit-chat conversation English. It should be something that sounds pretty formal. It sounds not academic, but it sounds formal. It sounds business-like, right? And it should be pretty correct also, right? That's sentences. Today I'm going to limit myself to 5 activities. I easily could put 10 here, but we're going to do 5. And then all 5 of these activities will be focusing on writing better sentences. So today you'll see something that deals with grammar, maybe something that deals with vocabulary. We're not doing punctuation today, for example. I'm not doing how to indent a paragraph or paragraph structure, not because they're not important, but only because today's focus is on sentences, sentences, and sentences. Okay, so why focus on sentences? Because sentences are the most basic unit of writing. You can't have a good paragraph without sentences. You can't have a good essay without paragraphs, and the paragraph we already said depends on sentences. All right, we got that information there. The sentence is the key building block to whatever you're going to write. And then if your sentences have too many mistakes in them, then what happens is the reader can't really focus and sometimes can't comprehend your message. Now, I want to say one thing. I am not going to say here that I expect my students or your students to write perfect English. It's okay to make some mistakes. Let me show you the parallel from speaking. Now that some people go, oh my gosh, they can't make mistakes. Yes, you can make mistakes. Forget about writing for a moment. Let's just talk about speaking. In today's session, I'm a native speaker of English, and we have some native speakers of English here from the United States and Canada. I saw a few people, but we also have a lot of non-native speakers of English. Many non-native speakers of English have an accent when they speak. I speak Spanish pretty fluently, but I have an accent in Spanish. I will always have an accent in Spanish. Sometimes it sounds better. Some days it doesn't sound so good, right? But I have an accent. It's a natural part of who I am as a non-native speaker of Spanish, for example. It's okay to speak with an accent as long as your accent is understandable and your message is able to be conveyed or put across to the listener, correct? Well, the same thing with writing, except one important difference is in writing, there's a permanent record of what you've done. And yeah, it's okay to drop the S from the verb for example, subject-verb agreement, a few times. But when you drop the S from the verb in a paragraph, and the paragraph only has, let's say, 6 sentences, which means you have 6 verbs, or maybe 7 verbs, or 8 verbs, and one of those verbs has a subject-verb error in it, subject-verb agreement error, that's one of those errors that bothers native readers. Now, it doesn't interfere with comprehension. So if you say, the main reason for those decisions are, well, that's wrong, because you should say the main reason for those decisions is, because reason is, correct? But I'm just saying, if you make a mistake, comprehension is not impaired. Comprehension is not hindered, but there is now an error that is what we consider a pretty serious error. It doesn't prevent comprehension, but it's an error that sort of marks you. It marks your written record as not fluent, not academic sounding enough sometimes, sort of careless, because subject-verb mistakes in conversation happen all the time. But when you have a paragraph that you've actually composed, you have time, we suppose, to go back and check it. That's why it's called composition, not free writing. Free writing is a very different animal. When you compose something, we're saying this is the best I can put forward. So sometimes there will be small mistakes, but you shouldn't have large mistakes. So today's activities are going to show you, my goal is for you to have 5 activities that will focus on certain kinds of errors that your students might make that will help them improve those writing situations. So all the activities today come from a book called Great Writing, Book 3. Brand new 5th edition for this book is already out. Several people mentioned Book 5 just now. Book 5 will be out in a few more weeks, but soon all new editions of all 6 books will be out. All right, I'm going to teach you 5 different activities today, or show you 5 activities. And for each activity, I'm going to talk about how to do it, what it looks like. I'm going to talk about what I consider the good aspects of this, the positive aspects, and also some of the negative aspects. Now, let me say one thing, because we have most people today have taught for more than 10 years. I've taught for 40 years. How many teacher conferences have I been to? How many webinars have I listened to? It's very, very rare for me to attend a webinar or a conference session and hear an hour where it's all brand new to me. So for those who've been teaching for a long time, some of the activities I'm going to show you today may not be so new for you, but whenever I hear an activity that's one that I've done before, or one that I've heard about and decided not to do, I try to listen to what the speaker has said and think, I don't know, maybe if I change this activity just a little bit, I would be able to try it with my students. So that's what I hope you learn from today's session. So having said that, here are the 5 activities we're going to do today. Some of you may want to take a photo of this just really quickly, but writing sentences with a new vocabulary item, not a brand new activity, I understand. Then we're going to practice look at practicing sentences with collocations. I'll explain what that is in a minute for those who don't know. We're going to look at helping students edit sentences where teachers have put feedback. People have put comments there, all right? The next thing is scrambled sentences. I'm going to show you a really cool way to do this activity where it's almost a game. My students love activity 4. And activity 5 is my favorite activity, okay? So I'm going to do that one last. All right, having named those 5 things, let's start with activity 1. Activity 1 is basically where I say, okay, class, we have these 10 words on the board. I would like you to go home and write a sentence with each of these 10 words. I want to say one thing. One of my, Emily mentioned earlier, one of my main research areas is vocabulary, vocabulary, and vocabulary. I think it's the most important thing you can do in any language, especially when you're at the intermediate or higher level. You don't go from intermediate to advanced by learning more grammar. You get better grammar control, perhaps, but what separates an advanced person in a language from an intermediate person, for me, is vocabulary, vocabulary, and even more vocabulary. That's what it is. So becoming a better writer at the advanced level is going to require good sentences, basic English sentence structure, plus better vocabulary. So you might do an activity that looks something like this. Here we studied some words in our class, and we have these 24 words: adapt, alternative, basically, concentration, conflict, decline, device, fantasy, etc. You can read those others. You'll see we have a V for verb, N for noun, etc. And sometimes you'll see an AW. An AW right here means that this is what we consider an academic word. We've used several sources: the academic word list, we've used the academic vocabulary list, we've used the new academic word list, several different word lists that are based on huge corpora, huge collections, databases of English from academic essays, from textbooks, from news items sometimes, right? So those are the vocabulary words. Wherever you get your words from, imagine you've taught some class, and in this class there were 10 new words, or even 5 new words. You have your 5 words on the board. A very, 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 I'm going to say, in my opinion, common teacher mistake, especially for beginning teachers, is to think, here's a really cool activity and an easy one. I will just tell my students, hey, for homework, go home and write 10 sentences. So yeah, you can do that. Let's look at the pros and cons of that. Well, one of the positive points is a number 5 here. It's very easy for me to say, okay, class, please write 10 sentences. But I have 30 students. If my 30 students on Monday night write 10 sentences each, that means on Tuesday they come to class with how many sentences? 300 sentences. And those sentences will not be nice, perfect sentences. Those sentences will have mistakes in them. So writing sentences is a good idea. It's a good task. But I also want to say I don't do it very much the way I've described it just now. I don't do it that way so much because it generates a lot of sentences, and a lot of students expect me to grade every single thing they write. Let me say right now, I don't grade, I don't mark, and yes, sometimes I don't even read every paper my students give me. The most important, think about that for a minute, and I know some people will be very upset to hear that news. A clock has 24 hours in it, 24 hours in a day, and I have 2 hands, and I'm one human being. And I can't possibly spend every night marking every single sentence. Also, what's the parallel in the conversation class? Suppose we're having an English conversation right now. We have somebody, I saw somebody from Brazil, Argentina, non-native speakers, I assume. We're having a conversation right now, and suppose somebody mispronounces a word. Do I stop the conversation and correct every single mistake? No, I don't do that. Number 1, it's rude, okay? And number 2, I don't do that because it would not be good for the conversation. Also, I don't think when you correct someone's mistake in the middle of their sentence when they're speaking, the student sometimes, usually I would say, doesn't even understand your correction because they're trying to get their message out as they're trying to speak the message, and you're interrupting them with this correction, if you will. It's just not very productive. So what I'm going to say is this. I do correct errors in spoken language, but I don't correct every error. By parallel extension, I don't correct every mistake that students make in writing because I don't correct every paper. Now, by correct, I don't mean make marks and give it a 73 out of 100. I mean, I don't take it and make marks on it. The most important thing in a writing class is that students need to write, write, and write. So I'm always trying to think of what are small, not long, but what are small tasks, small activities that my students can do for 10 minutes, for 12 minutes, for 7 minutes, that will get them to write, write, and write a lot. And then the paper gets given to me, and I might put it in a folder and go home and just watch TV that night. I don't feel the need now, at 40 years of teaching, I don't feel the need to mark every single thing on every single paper. Somebody might say, but my students expect me to do that. Your students may expect a lot of things, but I'm the teacher, and I get to decide what's happening here. And I'm deciding right now that we are not going to mark every paper. You don't know which papers I'm going to mark, and that makes you try on every single paper. So I'm trying to explain my background on this a little bit. But go back here. You've written sentences. What are some of the positive things? Well, students are writing. Go home and write 10 sentences. Okay, they'll do that. Students control the topic. Because if you go back to we had 24 words. I don't care what the topic is. You can write about any topic you want. So your 5 sentences can be, 5 different topics there if you want. Students can write a sentence with more than one vocabulary item. You could tell for example, to make it different, I might say your homework tonight is to write 5 sentences. 4 of them use 1 word, but in sentence number 5, I want you to put 2 of the words from the list. So here's what happens. Let me go back to my list. You think, well, if they only write 5 sentences, there are 24 words. 19 words aren't being touched for vocabulary. I would disagree. If I'm a student and I have this assignment, here's what's going to happen. I say, okay, I have to write 5 sentences. Adapt. Adapt means to change. No, I don't want to do that. Alternative. That means something's different. I don't want to do that one. Every time a student touches the word with their brain and says, I don't want to do that word, that's touching the word. So what happens is there are 24 words. If one student looked at each word one time, that would be 24 touches, right? 24 interactions with your brain and the word. But students will spend many interactions they'll spend many interactions just trying to choose what they consider to be the 5 words that they can write a sentence with the best, right? So this idea of writing 5 sentences, it's not a small little task because it never was 5 words and it's finished. Most students at least will check 10, 15, 20 words before they choose the 5 basic words, all right? Now let me say one thing here. This is very important. I just told you that I think you don't need to correct or mark every single paper. So what's another way to do this? So sometimes I tell the students, I want you to write these 5 sentences, and then I tell them this. If there's one sentence where you tried really hard to write the sentence and you're not sure if it's correct, I want you to come over here and I want you to put a circle around number 2, and that tells me that sentence number 2 for you was a hard sentence. So tonight, when I read your papers, I'll just do check, and number 3, I'll do check. But when I come to sentence number 2, where you have this circle, I will stop and give you a lot of feedback about one sentence. Now think about that for a minute. How often do I see teachers make comments and comments and comments, and the students look at it and say, yep, 83. They fold the paper and put it back in the book. Well, that's just not very productive to me. Because what's happening is the students, I spend a lot of time on the comments. So if I'm going to spend my time on the comments, I would like to get the most productive use of those comments. A lot of students are not going to read all 5 comments. So I tell my students in advance, I want you to choose one sentence, just one sentence, and circle that number, and I promise you, I will give you specific feedback about that sentence. In fact, if you have a question about this sentence, I want you to write, I tried to use the word attempt. Is this word attempt used correctly here in this sentence? I want you to try this, and you'll be surprised. When you tell students you can only have one circle, the next week, students will start asking me, but I have 2 questions. I said, nope, you can only ask me 1 question. Sometimes when you make something more difficult to do, students want to do more of it. So that's kind of a secret that I use in order to mark fewer papers, or to mark, I think actually to mark smarter. All right, so activity 1, negative. Students can make a lot of errors, but I'm not going to try to mark every single error. It's hard to correct this type of paper if you insist on marking every single error. One shortcut I just told you is tell them circle 1, and sometimes if you did the homework, you just get a check mark. You did the homework. I don't read the paper. The fact that you wrote is enough. But sometimes I'll just correct, put a check mark or an X by the one sentence that has the circle on it, right? And it takes a lot of time to score this. So I'm not saying don't have students write sentences, but I am saying I want you to think about this before you do it. Very easy to assign, very time-consuming to mark, all right? But I've already explained some ways I deal with that. Our second activity is to write a sentence with a collocation or a phrase. What's a collocation? Well, I'll give you an example in English. Let's take the word dozen, D-O-Z-E-N, dozen, D-O-Z-E-N. Dozen means 12. In English, I can say I have 12 cell phones, I have 12 pens, I have 12 headsets, I have 12 pairs of glasses. I can say that. But the word dozen, we usually don't say I have a dozen pens or I have a dozen headsets. I would say the number 12. What are some words that combine with dozen? So a dozen blank. Whatever word you would probably put in there, a dozen blank. So in English, you could put any noun. But there are 3 nouns that we know from linguistics, corpus linguistics research, 3 nouns that dominate the word a dozen. And they are a dozen eggs, obviously, a dozen donuts or bagels, and then also a dozen, anyone write it yet? Roses. Roses, no one, yeah, roses. Kathy got this, good. Kathy K got this. A dozen roses or flowers. So the 3 most common, most frequent collocations, co-location. The 3 most common collocations for the word dozen are a dozen eggs, a dozen donuts or a dozen bagels, and a dozen flowers or a dozen roses, something like that. Those are collocations. Let me show you some collocation practice. So in great writing, every chapter has a section at the back where we're trying to have students produce better sentences. It's called building better sentences. And we have different activities there. And one of the activities is on collocations. So look at these 5 collocations I have over here. I have the words abandoned, commercial, doubtful, endurance, and guarantee. Let's try these. So everybody, number one says, it is blank that. What will you think? What goes in blank number one? What would you put for blank number one? Type your answers in there. What combines with it is blank that? Yeah, well, the only one that will fit here is the word doubtful. It is doubtful that. That 4-word chunk, that's one big collocation, all right? It is doubtful that it will rain tomorrow, all right? Because it's Florida where it's sunny, all right? Let's try number two. Number two, a busy blank region. So which word, so region's a noun, so I need some kind of adjective here. What adjective would go in there? And we check our answers for this one. The answer is going to be commercial. A commercial region, a commercial area, a commercial zone, right? So that's commercial. Number three, a money back. Yep, many people I see there. Yeah. Suzanne, Rita, Mary, yes, got the word guarantee. A money back guarantee is number three. We'd all like to have a money back guarantee for many things, right? Number four is more difficult. Number four is, in my opinion, number four is the hardest one here. A sport of, yes, a sport of endurance. Now, obviously, this you might say, this activity is too difficult. My students couldn't do this. No, this is from book 3. This is an intermediate level book. This is not level 1. That's why we don't have cat, dog, pencil, paper, book, etc. So if it seems a little difficult, it is a little difficult. But the task is not difficult. The language is difficult because it's level 3 of the 5 levels there, right? And number 5 is a or an house. So a house, the only word left over is going to be abandoned, and that gives us number 5. Now, once you have this, then I would say your homework is, I want you to go write some sentences tonight, but your sentences must be these 5. It is doubtful that a busy commercial region. Let's take number 2. So if I just take number 2 there, if I just take number 2, where it says a busy commercial region, I could put that in the beginning of the sentence. I could say a busy commercial region is the place where we should start our new business. Or people don't want to live near a busy commercial region. It can be at the beginning of the sentence, at the end of the sentence, but the point is I control that. This is a little bit more difficult. And so you might give 5 of these, or I might tell my students tonight, here are 5 in the textbook. I want you to go home and write sentences with 3 of these. Which 3? You choose any 3. You choose the 3 that you want. All right. And again, if there's one that's a little difficult, I want you to put the circle. If for example, I think a sport of endurance. A sport of endurance might be a hard phrase for a lot of students to use. If they want, of course, they can go back in the textbook, in Great Writing Book 3. They can consult the paragraph and study this phrase in context, because there's nothing like seeing a vocabulary chunk in the actual context, right? It lets you see such a much more richer environment. But they can see how it's used and then write their own parallel version of that. All right? So an abandoned house is another one you could do. An abandoned house is located next to the bank. Lots of things you can do by having students write sentences with these. All right? Now, pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages. Students are writing sentences. And as I said earlier, my number 1 goal is to get people to write, write, and write. They're required to think what goes before this collocation and what goes after it. A lot more thinking involved with this one because it's a bigger phrase. You're practicing more difficult vocabulary and more difficult grammar. At a low level, the example I gave earlier was a dozen eggs. So if a dozen eggs is the chunk, is the collocation, for example, if you're a Spanish speaker or a French speaker, you might make the mistake and say a dozen of eggs. Well, in English, we don't say a dozen of. It's a dozen plus the noun, and the noun's going to be in the plural, right? So a student might write, we went to the store in order to buy a dozen egg. No, eggs needs to have the S on it, correct there? So you're dealing with vocabulary and grammar. It's very easy to assign. Actually, if you're using a textbook, it's very easy. This activity that we just finished, for homework tonight, I want you to write 3 sentences, etc. Negatives. Students can make a lot of errors, which is why I limit it to 5 sentences or just 3 sentences. It's hard to correct this. It's hard to correct it if you assign 10. I think that's the number 1 teacher mistake, is that when teachers assign writing original sentences, we assign too much. And of course, if you assign a lot, you're going to collect a lot. In my case, times 30 students times the number of classes, right? And again, the scoring issue. Let's look at activity number 3. So activity number 3 is, so in a writing class, the teacher picks up papers, and of course, at some point, we make comments on the student papers. And students need to take our editing comments and change them. So here's a paragraph. Again, activity 14. It's called editing. It's called editing from teacher comments. and this is a paragraph, so within the context of a paragraph, we have something called the problem with bright nights. I'll just start at the beginning. The beginning says, the night skies are so bright in the United States that most people under the age of 40 has never experienced true darkness, etc., etc., etc. Let's expand one of those. Here's the very beginning. Now, you'll see right now, I have 3 teacher comments in this section. And of course, this means every teacher knows subject-verb agreement, but many students don't understand what this means. And then we have art for article, and over here we have SP, right, with singular plural issues. And all of these codes are explained somewhere else. We do not have an extensive list of codes. Sometimes I find teachers will say, oh, they're very proud. I have this list of 2 pages of codes. 2 pages of codes is too many codes, because that's confusing. The students are here to learn English, not to learn 2 pages of codes, right? So how about this? How would you change the first one over here? So the student wrote the word has. What should the person have written here? Instead of writing the word has. So I see people writing the word have, okay? Yeah, so Paula Gonzalez wrote have is correct there. So many people, yeah, here, right here, we're going to write the word have. Why? What's the subject here? The subject is over here the word people. Well, students are confused because over here you have under the age, which is one prepositional phrase, and then we have of 40, which is another prepositional phrase. And since of is one number, it seems singular. But one rule in English is that a prepositional phrase in general does not affect subject-verb agreement. Yes, sometimes it does when you have words like all of the money is, all of the people are. So words like all and most and some, those you have some, the prepositional phrase will sometimes impact the subject-verb agreement. But for the most part, I could actually draw a line and cross this out, and I could cross this out, and I would be able to solve the problem here, right? What about over here where I have the art? This is a little more difficult. Astronomers have the scale for rating darkness. So the is not correct. Yeah, we just want to put a. There's no reason. You just want to have the word a because it's going to be a scale for rating darkness. And over here, our third example, it says, not only does too much light at night waste electricity, it can also cause sleep problem. So problem should be problems. Why? There's a rule in English. Problem is a count noun. And this, right now, this is a singular count noun. And in English, a singular count noun has to have decoration in front of it. It has to have an a, the, one, my. And over here, we don't have something right here. We don't have an a or a my or a the or one. And if we don't have any kind of determiner word here, then this has to be plural. All right, so what I've just done, this activity is called editing from teacher comments. Let me talk about the pros and cons. Positive. Students will learn to decipher teacher comments. Now, some teachers just circle. Sometimes I just circle it and you fix it. I'm not going to tell you what's happening. Other times, if it's a lower level class or a student who needs more assistance, I will actually write the error. I'll write subject-verb agreement or SV or something like that. And now we're focusing our attention on grammar errors, or it could be vocabulary. You could practice grammar, vocabulary, sentence structure, mechanics, and then it's easy to assign. Very easy to assign because my students make mistakes. I just take 5 sentences from 5 students' papers, write the sentences, or I take a paragraph as you saw earlier and put the comments there. One negative, students are not writing original sentences. Now, one thing I'm very big on is trying to have activities where students write, and write. But in the interest of time, because I have 30 students and I only have 1 hour a week for 3 hours, 1 hour per class, 3 hours a week, I only see my students a total of 45 hours in the whole semester. I don't have a lot of time to spare. So how do I speed things up? How do I get them to notice these mistakes? Well, the activity we just did with teacher comments, that's a pretty good way to do this, I believe. All right. And also, I should add, no papers to grade. So we do this activity as I just did. We do that in class. We do it in class. They work individually. They work in pairs, work in groups, solve it, and then we have them, group 1, tell me how you would change the first one. Group 2, how would you change the second one, etc. But when we finish, everything's been checked. I'm going home and watch TV. I'm not going to go home and read papers that night. Now, my next activity I really like is scrambled sentences. So this is not a brand new activity, but I want to share something with you here. So if you look at number 1 here, the task is it's called scrambled sentences. Your job is to unscramble the words and phrases to write complete sentences here. So we have the phrase a great deal of, thought, requires, deciding on, careful, a job offer. We have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I have 11 words here. Why do I not have 11 pieces? Why do I not have 11 words in a big string like that? I think it's too hard. It's too confusing. When you put 11 pieces, there is going to be more than one way to do it. It's just too confusing. And students will start producing sentences that make grammatical sense, but no semantic sense. All right? I don't want to practice that kind of task. So what I do is I have already put it in pieces. A great deal of, this teaches you to put deal with of. Thought, requires, deciding, takes the word on, careful, and a job offer. Here's what I would like you to do. I would like you, can you try to put these pieces together in one sentence? And I will tell you, this number one is not so easy. All right? So let's see. So Catalina, add the word deciding. So you have to keep the word deciding in there. Where does deciding go? All right, Suzanne put something. So deciding. So I will tell you, this is difficult. Start with deciding on. Start with deciding on blah, blah, blah. So I'll give you maybe 10 seconds to try to think of what you would do here. Again, this is not an easy activity. The activity is easy. This number one is not an easy sentence to do. It really isn't. Because we have a gerund, an ing, as a noun in the subject slot. Not an easy thing. So the correct answer I'll share with you right here is, here are the words that you have to deal with. A great deal of thought requires deciding on careful a job offer. It almost sounds like English if you read it that way. Yeah, the answer is deciding on a job offer, that's my subject, requires, that's my verb with an S, because anytime you have a gerund subject, it's going to be singular, a great deal of careful thought. So this teaches the collocation, a great deal of, another collocation, careful thought, and then deciding on, and then also another collocation, a job offer, and then the idea that an offer requires. So a lot is being practiced in this. It seems like a game, kind of fun activity, and it's true. It really is. But actually, it's much more, it requires much more creative thinking than some of the other activities we've done. All right, pros and cons. It's like a game. Now, my students like this activity a lot. Students can work individually or in pairs or in small groups. So I might start this in class and say, work by yourself for 8 minutes. So I give everybody 8 minutes to see what you can do. And you might say, if you don't want to spend 8 minutes, everybody gets 4 minutes. And over here on this side of the class, I want you to start with number 1. On this other side of the class, I want you to start with number 5. Or start with number 5. You guys do 1 to 5. You guys do 5 to 1 backward. And that way, these people will do 3, 4, 5. And over here, these people will do 1, 2, 3. Right? All right. Third thing, critical thinking. This activity is really hard. It requires you to know what a word like deciding with an ing can do. It can be part of a verb. He was deciding between blah, 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 right? And then it can also be in a subject slot. Deciding on something is difficult, right? It could also be object of a preposition. I was not interested in deciding on that job offer at that moment. Something like that, right? So a lot of critical thinking is required. And also time. I will tell you this. This activity seems like it might be hard to create. Here's how I create it. I do not try to create a sentence. I go back to learner needs. If my students are interested in science, or I'm a tennis fanatic, and in Japan, one of my jobs in Japan once was to teach English to intermediate level Japanese tennis players at a high school who were very, very good tennis players. When I used the regular textbook, nobody cared. They don't care about hi, how are you, fine, thank you. But I started bringing magazines from the tennis world into class. And we would study a paragraph about a famous tennis player, about Serena Williams or Roger Federer. When I brought tennis into class, people cared. If I'm teaching students who are business majors or are going to go into the university and study business or study biology or chemistry or engineering, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and find an engineering book or go to Wikipedia and find some engineering topic, and I'm going to take 5 sentences or 3 sentences, and I'm going to take those sentences and then cut those in pieces and rearrange them, and that's going to be my scrambled sentences. I'm not going to write them. I'm going to try to use real sentences from real content. I think you're going to have students who are a lot more interested in the material. So it says here, a little bit hard to create, but you can reuse these as well. Negative. Students are not writing original sentences, but they're doing a lot of writing. All right, and that's the same thing in number 2. Here also is something very important. At the end of this activity, we do it in class, we check it in class, we talk about it in class. Does anybody have any questions about number 2? Sometimes I'll say, in number 3, what if I change the word careful to carefully? Now where would you put the word carefully? Can it go in the same place? In other words, I'm trying to use the same 5 sentences, but the bottom line is, at the end of our activity, whether it's 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, there are no papers to grade. This is an activity we do in class. It's a fun activity. A lot of times I go to a writing class, and a writing class is not very active. It's called an activity for a reason. People are meant to be doing things, to be active, thinking about things, talking to other people. Yes, sometimes you want to write by yourself, especially when you do original writing. But other times in a writing class, especially if you have a writing class just after lunchtime or it's super early in the morning, students might not be awake at 8 o'clock, or they might not be awake at 1:30 after lunch, or they might not be awake at night if you're teaching this as a night class. So the activity we just did is one that's very fun for students to do together. Very active there. I'm going to go to my last activity, which is activity 5. Again, this is my top activity by far, all right? So combining sentences. It's really just basic sentence combining. But here's what we're going to do. You see that it's activity 25, combining sentences. You see number 1, number 2, and number 3. Do not do more than 3. You just want to have 3 sentences here. Why 3? In my experience, this activity, the way it's set up right now, will take you 20 minutes of class time. The first time you do it, it might take you 25 or even 30 minutes because students are not used to doing this activity the way I'm going to show you. But once you've done this activity, it's 20 minutes from start until finish, and no papers to grade that night anyway, okay? Let's look at number 1. Let me just expand number 1 for you. Here's number 1. Here's your task, everybody. Don't start writing yet. Just think. Don't write. I have these 3 sentences. Drinks are harmful to the teeth. The drinks are sugary. Children have teeth. Your task in a minute, not yes, your task is to combine the ideas, not the sentences. Don't do and. First, choose the main ideas in these 3 sentences, the most important details, and make one sentence that has all the information. You can change words, you can't change concepts. So first, let's do this. I will tell you, class, there are 5 ideas that are important. Right now, what do you think are the 5 nouns, 5 verbs? What are the 5 words that are the most important concepts in this combination or this listing of 3 sentences? So my 5, you see, I know you're writing sentences, and that's good if you can write the sentence, but you're the teacher. So most of my students, well, I don't know what to do. They'll just put and. Let's start. I would first choose the word drinks. Now, I will also choose the word harmful, teeth. I'm not choosing drinks again because we already have it. I'll choose sugary, and then I'll choose the words children, but I'm not going to choose teeth again. Now, it's okay to change harmful to dangerous. It's okay to change sugary to too sweet or something like that. It's not okay to change children to kids because kids is not the same academic level. Kids is kind of a conversation word, slang, if you will. It's not considered, It's not that it's not polite. It's just not academic formal language, the way the word children is. So it's okay to change words. You just can't change concepts. Now, everybody, what sentence will you produce? Now, put all of these together into one sentence. And this is where I see it. Valentina wrote, sugary drinks, let's see. So it's going, my eyes are, sugary drinks are harmful for children's teeth. That's one way to do it, yes. So notice what I said. So Valentina Maria wrote a sentence, and her sentence is possible. And so here's what I said. I did not say that's correct. When you check this activity, try not to say that's correct. Because when I say that's correct, then everybody else stops. They all shut down because they think I have now announced the one correct answer. And there is not one correct answer. For this combination, there might be 3 or 4 different ways to do it. I could even introduce the word if, and I can say something like, if children drink sugary drinks, comma, this will be harmful to their teeth. Now, I've changed a little bit, but I've changed some of the words. I've changed the grammar, but the concept is still the same. So in this case, what I'm saying is the purpose of this activity is not to get the one correct answer. Why? Because there is not one correct answer. There are different variations possible. Students sometimes will ask me, well, which one is correct? My answer is there is not one correct sentence. Which one is better? Well, now there we have an answer. Which one is better depends on this sentence inside the paragraph. So let me go back for a second. If I go back, this activity today, you see there are 3 sentences. So in the Great Writing series, many times, in fact, every chapter, you will see an activity just like this. But sometimes you will also see an activity where we have this only number 1. You have to combine the words into one sentence, but the sentence fits into a paragraph which is on the same page. So I want you to imagine there's a paragraph which is missing 2 lines. You'll see in number 1. So the sentence has to be a good sentence, good, correct order, not the correct, but correct order. And then that correct order has to fit inside the paragraph. So it does get more complicated. When I do this activity, I divide my class into groups of 3s. So I have 30 students. My students will break into 10 groups of 3s, and we work. I say, ready, set, go. Okay, everybody, for number 1, I want you to think about number 1 right now. So doing number 1, ready, set, go, you have 2 minutes. And the team, each team puts together these sentences. When they finish, I'll say, time, everybody stop. Okay, right now I have a big whiteboard in the class. I have 10 markers, and I'll say, right now, I want 10 of you from each team. I want one person to go to the board, take a marker, and write your team's sentences on the board. All right, and then we compare what people have written on the board. So it's really a cool activity. It's fun. I really, really enjoy doing this one. All right, so positive things. Students have to identify key information. Earlier, people mentioned summarizing, and somebody might have said paraphrasing. I think I saw that. But paraphrasing and summarizing are very hard skills, even for native writers of English, Spanish, Japanese, whatever your language is. So this activity is actually one that's very good for native speakers, I believe, in helping native and non-native speakers alike compose better sentences, because you have to start by identifying key information. Critical thinking. Big time. Lots of critical thinking here because, yeah, there were lots of words. Those 3 sentences had a lot of different words. And again, I gave 3 pretty easy ones just now for number 1. But you can make this harder or more difficult depending on the students that you're teaching. This can be done as a game. No grading if you do it the way I showed you just now as a game in class. Again, negative. Well, you can say students are not writing original sentences, but I would say yes, they are. If the job is to write a paraphrase or to write a summary, summarize things, your sentence is original. The ideas are not original. The words are not original, perhaps, but what you produce actually is. All right. So here are the 5. Sort of summarize what we've done today. Students need to write good sentences. We've already talked about why writing good sentences is very important. Sentence writing is not complicated, because you can reach a certain level and write medium sentences. But when you try to have students write better sentences, it's not about just writing simple sentences to be good sentences. I want to make my language more advanced. How do I do that? Well, we showed you some activities just now today. We looked at 5 activities. 5 activities where students are writing, writing, and writing. Lots of writing. I hope not so much teacher grading, but lots of student writing. All right? And then, and also not grading. That's the most important thing. So writing, but not teacher grading. And I also today presented 5 activities. I tried to present a balance of activities. Think about the first activity we did, which was writing original sentences. 100% creative, 100% free original writing. The word is dozen, write a sentence with that, right? The topic, how long the sentence is, I don't care at all, as long as you have the word dozen in your sentence. And then we got up to activity 4 and 5, where it was much more controlled, but students were still writing original sentences there. All right? And with that, I'm going to stop my presentation for today. So I hope you enjoyed what you heard today, and I hope it was clear enough. If anyone has any questions, you feel free to let us know, contact us, and we're happy to share more information with you. I'll turn this over to Emily now. Emily might want to talk. We have some time for maybe Q&A.
Yeah, it looks like we have about a minute if anyone wants to jot a question in the chat box right now. But if not, like Keith mentioned, you can definitely always contact us. The email is ngl.webinars@cengage.com. Put it in the chat box right now or reach out to us on social media, the blog. Just definitely let us know if you do have any follow-up questions. I see one that came right in. Are all these from Great Writing / Grammar from Great Writing? These are all from Great Writing, from the 5th edition, level 3, I believe.
Yes. Right, and they are, and so a question that someone asked in another session today was, well, do I have to use these from the book? Well, they're all in the book. They're all very convenient for you. We've checked all of these. We know that those sentence combining activities, they've been tried with with hundreds of students before over the years. They work really well. But I tried to use activities today that are flexible for many different topics. One thing I'll just say, so you say, well, all of my students are going to be business majors, and I want to do that. Well, as I explained earlier, just go to Wikipedia or any kind of business textbook, and you can grab sentences from there. That's one way to do that as well.
Right. I did see one question from Gershon. What about using the first activity to write a concrete detail?
Yes, that's a very good idea. So what was it? So Gershon has this question here. So the first activity today was writing original sentences. So one way to do it, obviously, is sort of it's totally free. And I said, okay, here's the word is dozen. Do whatever you want. Or I could make it more specific. I could say, all right, today's topic is, I don't know, geography or maps. Today's topic is maps. So every sentence you write has to be giving some detail about a map. So you could say, for example, I could say Russia is surrounded by at least a dozen countries. Russia is surrounded by at least a dozen nations, or something like that. So that's one way to do it. Or I can say there are at least a dozen nations in South America, something like that. So I know if you ask them to give a specific detail, that's actually one way that might make the writing a little bit better. To me, it's a little more difficult, and that's a good thing, because what we're not trying to do is I am not trying to get students to practice what they can already do. Right? Now think about that. So sometimes teachers will say, well, I want them to choose something they can, that's kind of easy. They can develop fluency. That's one thing to practice. But if I want students to increase their level, their proficiency, they need to try harder. And so by trying harder, that idea Gershon had just said about specific details, give them a map or tell them it's about I don't know, cooking some kind of food or traveling to a specific place. Or National Geographic textbooks are full of really, really great photos. Every unit begins with 2 facing pages, and if you use a National Geographic books, you know those 2 opening pages of any chapter are just amazing. Maybe you could do as you turn to those 2 pages in your textbook, pages 40 and 41, for example, open your book there, and I want you to write 5 sentences for things that you see or that you can imagine based on pages 40 and 41 in your textbook. That would be a great way to use those photographs. In fact, so many teachers say, oh my gosh, National Geographic, the photos are amazing, and then they don't use them in class. These books are full of great photos. Please use them in your writing classes. Great. Especially.
Well, thank you so much, Keith, and we're just about out of time now, but definitely contact us, everyone, if you have any other questions. Thanks so much for joining us. A few quick things as we wrap up now. We will be sending along a certificate of attendance, the slides, and a recording. The slides and recording will also be uploaded on our website. It's actually right here, eltngl.com/webinars. And you can register for future upcoming ones there as well. And then definitely be sure to subscribe to our blog if you have a chance and connect with us on our social media channels. I'm going to send you all to a feedback survey now. We'd love to hear what you thought. And definitely we hope you join us again soon. All right. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Keith.
Thanks. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you.